I'm Jen Plant Johnson, and I'm an independent film producer, and I'm working on a documentary about the South Shore Mothers Group, which is a group of 5 Massachusetts mothers, my mom included, who are all in their 70s and 80s. And they've all raised children with Down syndrome and autism. And they've been a supportive presence and a force for advocacy in their home state for 50 years. Now, I will be the first one to tell you that I never in a million years thought that I would be making a film about the South Shore Mothers Group and my mom. Way too close to home. But there are no accidents. And that's what I want to talk about today. It's this notion of there are no accidents. Usually we point that idea to the past, and we use it to make sense of things that have happened and try to make meaning from them. But what I've learned in this process, and what I want to share with you today, is that there are no accidents can be a tool that you point at the present and the future. And it can allow you to incorporate things that you're not seeing because you're so focused on your outcome and your plans. And people ask me, like, what do you do? You're a producer. What is that? What do you do? I think the best thing for me to do today is just tell you the story that I don't usually share, which is my personal journey and how that led me to this notion that there are no accidents and using that as a tool. So we'll go back to 2019, and my wife's job had taken us to Sweden, and we had been there for 2 years, and we were raising our 2-year-old son and working, and I was working mostly collaborating on international co-productions with partners back in Los Angeles. And a friend of a friend who was a teacher reached out to me, and she worked with students who are all asylum seekers, starting their lives over in Sweden. And she had a student who was a film major. She had a thesis. Would I take a look and meet with her on Skype? Of course. So I watched this film, but it's not like anything that I have been immersed in over here in this world of film that I've been living in. It's super personal. It's about someone who has to leave their homeland in the middle of a war as a teenager and start over. And all of the threats and all of the feelings that go along with that. But it was 8 minutes. And the last scene of the film, we're in the living room and the kitchen of her apartment in Sweden with her family, and the camera pans the room, and you see for the first time her brother. And he's a young man with Down syndrome. And I email her and I say, I can't wait to meet with you. I have so many questions about your film. But in the meantime, I just want to share with you that you and I have something in common. And I send her a picture of my brother, Peter. So the next time we talk, we're sharing stories about our brothers. And I send her the book. And the South Shore Mothers Group published this book themselves in 2011. And in it, each mother takes a chapter and describes a specific aspect of what it's like to raise a child with an intellectual or developmental disability or autism or neurodiversity. And they wrote it to share it with other families, and the proceeds from this book went to the Arc of the South Shore, where all of their programming was in this community. So when I talked to her the next time, she says, I got your book and I read it. I read the first chapter out loud to my mom, and I translated it into Arabic so that she could, we could share. And then I got to the end, and she wanted me to keep going. So we read the whole thing in one sitting. And we were both crying. And my mother and I just said the same thing. We've never heard the story that we feel. This is us. I thought I was the only one. Never heard the mother story so honest. And I say to her, I'm so glad that it resonated with you. I really hope that it would. I really have always thought that someone should just shine a light on these stories. They're so important. And guess what she said? Hello, why don't you shine the light? You're a filmmaker, right? And she said these things to me that I think of them every single day. Very simply, she said, forget about all that LA stuff. Just do it for yourself. Do it as a heart project. If you don't tell their stories, who will? And when someone tells you the truth like that, you can't deny it. And it lit a fire under me, actually. And, all these other projects that I had been working on for years, it was like Icarus in the myth, pushing that boulder up the hill. And this, as soon as I accepted this heart project, it was like one yes after another. It just felt charmed. I got the blessing of the mothers group. And they could see that this was something that they could participate in. And I've always felt so close to these stories. I knew I needed an objective eye, and I found the perfect director to collaborate with. A woman that I'd known for years, and I knew her work, and I'd always wanted to work with her, and she had worked mostly as a producer, but really her passion was directing, and she got it. And more than anything else, she was someone that I could trust in the living rooms of these people that I had grown up with. My wife got a job back in the United States and changed her path, and we ended up back in the US, close to Massachusetts. I mean, closer than Sweden anyway, right? And I had a plan, because I'm a producer. And I was like, this isn't going to be one of those Icarus projects. Nope, we are going to get this done. And we are going to do a funding sample, and then we're going to get the investors and the money and the backers. And we are going to release this film in 2021 on the 10-year anniversary of the publishing of the book. Right, so I don't have to tell you what happened, because our first shoot was scheduled for March of 2020. And COVID, it came and it stopped our production path. But it also started to become a character in our story. What we realized is, yes, our subjects in our film are all over 65. Their adult children are immune compromised. They're very carefully laid out plans and routines that were so vital were just completely uprooted. And it was devastating. And these people were not on social media TikToking about their experience. They were just getting through the day. But we were documenting their day-to-day. What was it like in 1974 when you found out your baby had Down syndrome? And the doctor's best advice to you was, put him away. Trust me. Go home and take care of your normal children. Tell your friends he died. And to choose to not take your doctor's advice and to take your child home to a community that really had nothing to offer in terms of understanding, in terms of resources, in terms of programs. When you found other mothers who were in a similar situation in your area, and you came together and you started to map it out, okay, I guess we have to do this for ourselves. And you became, what was it like to become the unwitting pioneer, leaving this era of institutionalization and moving into the era of community integration for children with disabilities? What was it like? It's about mothers. What else is it about? It's about mothers. The noun and the verb. We're going to show you what else it's about. We've realized that that's our job. It's not to fit in over here. It's to tell a story that needs to be told, because it's not being told. So 2 years have gone by. We still don't have a funding sample. We have hardly any footage, have iPhone footage. We have a bunch of audio. But we're going to Boston for the first time. It's July of 2021, and we're going to shoot our funding sample. We got our crew for that shoot, and we also got this message. that we needed to hear. And it was people saying things like, yeah, you know, COVID was really hard. I didn't work as much as I could, but you know, I take these regular jobs so that I can do things like this that mean something to me. And I read your project description, and you know, I have 2 sons with autism, and this story really means something to me. And it wasn't just one person. It was a lot of people who had someone, who were parents themselves, and they really got it. And I realized this wasn't just our potential audience to connect with the film, that this actually was telling us that the next generation needed to be a part of our story. And it was really scary because increasing the scope of our film that we already had no funding for. But we tell the story of the mothers, we go back in time, we talk about what it was like through all of the parenting milestones up until adulthood, and now we're in this time of end of life. And these women are planning for what's going to happen to my adult child when I'm gone. And that's kind of the real-time story that we're tracking. But in the midst of that, we bounce out to the next generation. And we find out what are the battles that are still being waged, that they've been waging all along. And we've made so much progress in 50 years, but what still needs to change here? And we also see there's an opportunity when we represent these next generation voices in our film to be intentional about who we bring in, because we've got a group of 70 and 80-year-old white ladies from a suburban New England environment. You know, and we have an opportunity to hear from other experiences, other cultures, other voices, other family structures, and other geographical locations, which we realize is very important because what we've learned in all of these stories and all of this research is that where you're born, where you're lucky enough to be born, really determines so much about the opportunities and the resources available to you if you are a person with an intellectual or developmental disability or autism or neurodiversity. So this next generation question, I see it like a constellation. And I don't quite know how to connect it all, and I'm starting to feel very overwhelmed about the scope because we got our funding sample done, but we have applied for every single grant and every funding opportunity and every lab and thing that we can, and we still don't have any money to make the film. 2 more years have gone by, and it's April of 2023. And we have to go back to Boston again because we have to pick up with these stories that we've established in these first interviews. And so we have a fiscal sponsor, and I decide, you know what, I wasn't planning on this, but I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign. And I'm going to raise $50,000 in 60 days so that we will have our full crew go back and complete this Mothers Group story. And it's April. It's a few weeks, like a couple weeks before I'm going to launch this campaign, and I'm just like up to my eyeballs. And I remember that I made a commitment to a young student. I work at a school, and a middle schooler who is a family friend of ours asked me if I would chaperone his Model UN event at Michigan State all day Saturday. And I can't, of course, I can't say no, and I can't back out because I really want to support him, and the school doesn't have a middle school Model UN, and he's taken it upon himself to do this. So there are no accidents, right? And I have this perspective, so I'm like, you know what? This is going to allow me a full day with my laptop to get a bunch of work done while he's competing. We get to the event, and the keynote speaker that morning is a gentleman from Ghana who's a PhD candidate in Michigan State. And my ears kind of like, Ghana, like I'm super interested in Ghana because I have a friend who's a film director from Ghana, and I worked on a film there before my son was born. And start to think about Ghana all of a sudden, and I go, hey, there's an international film production connection that I forgot all about. And while he's talking, he talks about the organization that he started, which is for parents of children with disabilities in Accra. And it's about mothers helping other mothers help break down stigma and learn modalities that are culturally appropriate. So, of course, I introduce myself to him afterwards, and we start talking, and I tell him about my doc, and he motions to his colleague to come over. He goes, "What was I just talking about on the way down here?" I was just saying, I wish I knew something about film, because I really think it would be so important to shine a light on our organization and these families and what they're doing to help other people understand what's possible. There are no accidents. The constellation, accept it. This is what's happening. And we do the crowdfunding campaign, and yes, it's a means to an end. We exceed our goal, but it's the first time we go public with the project. And this idea of the next generation becomes even stronger because people connect with our story and they become the contacts, the potential subjects in other parts of the country and in other parts of the world to help make it that much easier to produce these interviews and these moments. So we're not done yet. But my approach is very much about there are no accidents. And I started this by saying that producing is about connecting. And that's the what of producing. But the how of producing and what I'm learning is so much about there are no accidents and how to use that and how to incorporate that. Even this TED Talk, which was an amazing opportunity that came to me, but not at the best time. And all along, I think there are no accidents. It's allowed me to distill my story into a context that I can share it. And it's preparing me for the next stage, which is going into pitch meetings. So I thank you, Ted. And I hope that this resonates with some of you for things that are going on with you and whatever endeavor, whatever thing is in front of you that feels like maybe it's an obstacle or it's slowing you down or it's taking more time. Maybe that you can reframe that and sort of look into that and take some of this with you, and hopefully it'll relate to what's going on for you. I hope it does. Thank you.